Hello, everybody. On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly mini-series about books, culture, and what to read next. I'm Sarah Marie, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. In this episode, we are excited to share with you what we have been reading, watching, and or listening to during Shelf Isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to our Readers Roundtable expert and moderator, Michelle.
Thanks, Sarah Marie. If you remember last time I said I was just started a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I'm not quite finished just yet, but I am about 75% through the audio and I'm very much enjoying it. So I'm really looking forward to next week. I'll finally be able to tell you guys all about it. So yay. So in the meantime, I just started rereading one of my favorite manga graphic novels, by Captor Sakura by Clamp. This is a magical girl story. It's about Sakura Kimamoto, who one day finds a strange book in her father's library, which ends up being magical and lets all of these magical energies out. And she meets Karo, who is a little lion plushy looking thing who is a magical creature, and she has to go collect all of these cards. It's very just lovely and fun, and her best friend makes the cutest costumes for each time she goes to capture all the cards. They're all based off of different elements and different things. It's just really fun. I'm really looking forward to rereading it again because it's really one of my favorites. And that's actually all that I have to talk about today. So I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I did the usual on reading books. I read the third in a series. Then I went to the second, and now I'm going to obviously have to get the first. But the book I started was The Dollhouse by N.J. Aldridge. If you'd like a really, really good police thriller, these are really great. They follow Detective Inspector Helen Grace, and it's a pretty gritty story. This one, it's about a girl being abducted, and she's not really trustworthy or reliable, and she's just starting to get back together with her family, and her mother's coming to pick her up to move her back home, and she's not there. So the mother's not sure, did she do this intentionally so she's not coming back, or what's going on? And so then the family starts getting texts saying, I've decided I can't get back together, on and on with you. I don't want to come back home. But really, she's been abducted. And it's her abductor who is sending these messages. And in the meantime, there's also a family at the beach, and the boys and the mother are digging in the sand, and they discover a body. So it all kind of ties in together, and it's a really good kind of cat and mouse type detective story where you learn a lot about the detective. She has a pretty dark past, so you get bits and pieces of that, and it goes on and on. Highly recommend it. So then, like I said, I went to book number 2. So remember, book 3, book 2, wrong order. So anyway, I read Pop Goes the Weasel. And this one, very, very gruesome, very, very good. Learned other things about Helen that probably had I read this one that I could have pieced it together better in the third one. But anyway, so I read this one, another one, really, really good, lots of twists and turns. It's a serial killer who basically, she's a prostitute, and these men come up to her, obviously, and she ends up brutally murdering them and then sending a part of them home. So it's their heart. And she sends it either to their home, to their work, basically to humiliate them. But anyway, lots of dark twists and turns, very, very exciting ending. So I recommend both of these. And next week I'll read Eenie Meenie, the first one that introduces Detective Helen Grace, and I will let you know what I think on that one. Now, on to better things. I actually cooked again from Half Baked Harvest, my favorite cookbook, and I made the steak, I'm not sure how to say it, shawarma bowls. Anyway, Gus, it was excellent. I didn't save any for you. So we really, really, really enjoyed it. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to the person who always seems to follow me, Gus, the gaming guru.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm sure you're kidding. I'm still waiting for it in the mail, so I'm going to hold you to that. So this week I bought a new shirt, the Regal Beagle, established in 1977. I think you guys know where that's from. If you don't, it's a trivia question. Other than that, I have been reading a graphic novel. It is called Sweet Tooth. Came out in 2010, and it was a series. I think it lasted for about 3 years, but it's in graphic novel form, and it's excellent. It is created by Jeff Lemire, and it is about a young boy who is like a hybrid deer and a boy, and his name is Gus. So it's even better because of his awesome name. And this boy, you really don't know where he comes from. You don't know what his backstory is, but he's a really nice boy. And his dad is like a religious fanatic, and he's just scaring him all his life. And they live in this cabin in the woods and all that stuff. And the story kind of starts when he kind of gets kidnapped, and people are trying to kill him left and right. So it's a really good story. I don't want to ruin anything. It is kind of like post-apocalyptic type story. It's really good. It's an excellent, I mean, not just because his name is Gus, but it's an excellent graphic novel. Highly recommend it. Jeff Lemire is a good artist, I think, and he's a good writer. And he also has some other ones that are really good as well. So check him out. That's what I've been reading. But Stephanie was right. I am the gaming guru. You know that. All right. And I know you guys are waiting to see what I'm playing next. I haven't been giving the Xbox a lot of love lately, although I did show you my controller a couple weeks ago. But being at home, I can go to my backlog of games. And for some reason, I've never played this series, and I just wanted to check it out. It was pretty good. Mass Effect Andromeda. Well, I see you shaking your head. I don't know about that. So it got some negative reviews. I know. It didn't get some good reviews when it came out. But I never played Mass Effect, and I'm about an hour or two into it. And it's okay. It's not the best game ever, but it's pretty enjoyable. Give me like a Star Trek vibe, I'd say. So it's okay. But the good thing is, for all you gamers out there, Stephanie, I'm looking at you. Anybody with an Xbox, there's a lot of cheap games out there. If you go on Amazon, now's your time to get, because the new Xbox is going to come out holiday season. So now's your time to get a lot of cheap ones. I think I picked this one up for, I want to say like $5. So check it out. That's kind of what I've been doing. And with that, I will give it to Karen.
Okay, thanks, Gus. I hardly know how to follow that, but in my case, it's been kind of a virtual week. I don't think I've turned a physical page in a long time. I have been looking at what's on my shelf in Libby, because I've mostly for the past few weeks been putting things off as they arrive. It's on hold. I want to delay it another few weeks, and now they're all starting to arrive at once, and I decided to pick two. What I picked were one audiobook and one book. The audiobook is Calypso by David Sedaris. You've probably read things by him before. He does a really good job reading his own work. I've read his books and listened, and I think, as usual, this goes from hilarity to tragedy real fast and back again, but it's always interesting. So in this book, part of the time he's making observations on approaching the age of 60, which are interesting, and the usual family stuff and all that. So the book that is the e-book is called Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. And I had read reviews when this first came out, and it looked like an interesting book. Thought maybe I should read it, so it finally came. And you may also have heard of this. I think it's been in the news. He's been interviewed on the radio and things. But it's about a family of 12 children in Colorado, 10 boys and 2 girls. And 6 of the boys turn out to have schizophrenia. And this is their story, story of the family and its members, and also the story of some of the research that went on back, let's see, maybe 70s or 80s up till now. And it doesn't get too bogged down in the scientific part of it, but it does say, they're trying to decide, is it a nurture thing? Is it the way people are raised? How did these people end up in the same family? Is there some connection, some genetic thing? And it is interesting how they're researching it. According to Libby, I'm 74% finished, so I'll know soon how it comes out. But anyway, I would recommend both of these. So on to Lisa.
Thanks, Karen. This week, I've mostly just started reading stuff, unless you count rereading Calvin and Hobbes again, but I do that habitually. So this week, I'm starting to reread Fahrenheit 451 because I had a hold on it, and I haven't read it since I was probably in grade school, and I know I did not appreciate it back then, so I just it's supposed to be a classic, so I wanted to just reread it and see if I will like it better now that I don't need to read it. And also I'm no longer 13. See if that works. And then the other thing that I'm just starting is Neil Gaiman, Snow, Glass, and Apples, which just came in on my Libby holds. And I haven't actually read anything by Neil Gaiman before, so this is my first experience with him, and we'll see how this goes. I'm excited about that. And now I'll pass this on to Sarah.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'll start with my recommendation from my 20-month-old. This is Love is a Truck. He's obsessed with cars and trucks, and I realized that a lot of his car books had mostly white people in them. So I ordered a bunch of books from Thrift Books, and this has been a definite favorite. It's very simple, just a little boy playing with his trucks, and Henry loves it. Every time we read it, as soon as we're done, he hands it back to me and says, "Adin, Adin." That's how he says again. So yeah, definitely recommend. He especially likes this page and just pointing out all the different trucks and cars. So this is a new favorite in our house. Love is a Truck. And then I've read 2 audiobooks this week, and they're both very different and both very good. So the first was Long Bright River by Liz Moore. It's a police procedural. The main character, Mickey, is a beat cop, and her younger sister is a prostitute who is addicted to mostly heroin. And her sister has gone missing at the same time that they're finding bodies of women who have either OD'd or been murdered. It's not quite clear at the beginning. And so Mickey is trying to figure out what has happened to her sister and trying to sort of solve this mystery, even though it's really not her responsibility. She's a beat cop, not a detective. But it was really well told. It's more about the opioid epidemic and what it's done to families than it is a mystery, although there are definitely elements of a mystery. And it was really compelling. And I usually switch back and forth between ebook and audiobook. And this one, I only had the audiobook. So by the end of the book, I was listening to it at like 2 times speed, just wanted to know what happened. So very compelling. The second one I read this week was The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird. So very different from Long Bright River. A very sweet story. The premise is the main character, Lydia Bird. At the beginning of the book, she's getting ready to go out to dinner with her family and with her fiance, and he gets into a car accident and passes away. So she's dealing with her grief and recovering, and discovers that if she takes a sleeping pill and goes to sleep, she ends up in like an alternate universe where he is still alive and time is still passing. So she's trying to deal with her grief and figure out if she wants to keep going into these dreams and seeing him. But a very sweet story. Just finished it like 10 minutes before this, and I definitely recommend both of those. So I will pass it on to Sarah Marie.
Thanks, Sarah. This week, as opposed to what I usually do, I've picked up one of my physical books that I have in my house, as opposed to all of the ebooks that I usually read. This is I'll Be There For You by Kelsey Miller. It's the book about Friends. Friends is my problematic fave in terms of sitcoms. I have a lot of nostalgia towards it because I grew up watching it alongside Buffy the Vampire Slayer with my family each week when TV was still a syndicated thing that you had to wait a week for instead of binge it. And it's my favorite still now just because I will get on soapboxes and have 2-hour-long discussions about Friends. You know, how Ross is one of the most horrible creatures to ever appear in television, how it is bananas that the show has 6 people and none of them are of color. In New York, how they dealt with Ross's ex-wife and just everything in between. And it's really interesting to me to read this book again, and it's really coincidental. They're doing a Friends reunion on HBO Max soon, now that Friends has now moved over to HBO. And a few days ago, the creator of Friends, Martha Kaufman, wrote an article in Vulture saying that she had made very different decisions when creating Friends. So reading this book in conjunction with that article and talking about background information about the show, but like why it was moved to the 8 o'clock spot, like what was happening when it became so popular so immediately, and how they got all their guest stars and so forth and so on. That is always going to be fascinating to me, but the behind the scenes stuff and how it affected the cultural zeitgeist is also interesting. The other thing, and I'm going to step on Gus's toes because I have also been playing video games, or I should say replaying video games, sorry Will, is Horizon Zero Dawn. This I have probably played a few times as well. I'm probably on like hour 120 of my save. I'm on the New Game Plus edition. I can see Gus is now coming over to pull up his own copy in the foreground. It's just a beautiful game. I'm probably 120 hours total in, and I just keep seeing the narrative threads. If you go, so there's a main storyline, and then there are all these narrative threads of side quests that you can go on. If you don't go on the side quests, it will not affect the main storyline, but if you do go on the side quests, they're just such beautiful stories. You're helping these people solve problems. Some of them are abducted, some of them have a sick kid, some of them, their lover is missing, and they're just good narrative threads, and it will, at the end, kind of bring more towards the end of the story. But more than that, it is just gorgeous. The scenery is breathtaking. The sound recording is amazing. The amount of detail, and then in the story itself, the side characters are such lived-in personalities that it is like I'm playing this game for the third time and I'm still finding new things to appreciate about it, or I'm swept away with the beauty of the scenery and the narrative story overall. It's just very touching. So if you get a chance, it's at the library. Horizon Zero Dawn, the new game, the sequel, is coming out for the PS5. Probably it's going to be one of their launch games. And next, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
I have 2 books to talk about this week, which I just finished today and yesterday. The first is The Mountains Sing by Ngoan Phan Quamai, which is a tale of a young girl who lives with her grandmother in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And we get the story of sort of the present, which is, of course, the 1970s at that point, and also her grandmother's stories from the 1940s and 50s of the land reform in Vietnam and afterward. So it's a war story. There's, a lot of bad things that happen, fortunately, not too graphically described, although bad enough, but it's also a story of love and a family story. And we are having a book club discussion of it on Friday, July 10th. You heard it here first, unless you attended Readers Roundtable this week, but this is almost fresh news. And the book is available for download from Hoopla with no waiting, if you would like to go that route. And Hoopla has arranged for the author to speak on Instagram Live, which will be this coming Tuesday. So I will provide information about that in the show notes. I hope you can join us to discuss the book. It's a pretty entertaining read, but also one that's thought-provoking. And then the other book that I finished just today is The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. It's an informative book about, his thesis is basically that a lot of policing in particular areas, especially the war on drugs, prostitution, and policing schools, doesn't really reduce crime. And therefore that money should probably be better spent in other programs, like social programs that might do better in reducing the problem. So it is a pretty engaging read. I mean, you can tell his political viewpoint just from the title, but it was interesting. I learned a lot from it. And that book is available as an ebook for free from the publisher, Verso Books. So if you just go to Verso Books and look for it, you can currently download it for free. So that was a pretty interesting read as well. And with that, I will pass it to whoever is next.
Thank you, Catherine. So this week, I mentioned last week that I had been scanning my shelf to find something to read, but I also had a bag of advanced reading copies that were sitting in my living room, and I went through them. And I was very excited to see that I had The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Merson. This is his most recent book. It's about the first year that Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of England. He started the book on May 10th, 1940, and ends in May 1941. I'm only about 20% through the book, so I haven't gotten all of it. But Winston Churchill was not actually the first choice of both Chamberlain when he stepped down and King George. They wanted Lord Halifax to do it, but Lord Halifax didn't think he could do it because they were really on the verge of World War II with Germany. So Halifax didn't think he could do it. But Churchill had always dreamed of being prime minister. So it is its first year, and it's a very exciting book. It's got a lot of detail in it because it only covers a year, and it's like 500 pages. So if you really want a good book, The Splendid and Vile is available at the library. You can place a hold, and it's also available on Libby. So you can place a hold for both the ebook and the audiobook. The other book I'm reading this week for my Read Harder book challenge, and it was to read a book that takes place in a rural setting. And I like this kind of challenge because it's set up that you can do fiction and nonfiction. And so I selected a memoir by Michael Perry called Population 485. He grew up in a very small town in northwestern Wisconsin called New Auburn, and they have a population of 485. When he graduated from high school, he went to nursing school and lived away from town, but 19 years after he graduated, he decided to move back home. He was a nurse by trade. He also took EMT training, and it was interesting because he talked about his EMT training, and both his mother and his brother were in his EMT class. But when he returned to town, he did want to go back to the dairy farm that he grew up on, and he really couldn't do much else. But in order to reintroduce himself to the town, he decided to join the volunteer fire department. And he joked that there were two qualifications. One, that he had a pulse, and two, that he was frequently home during the day. Most of the good jobs in the area were 30 to 40 miles away, so the town itself didn't have a lot of jobs. So the book talked about his experiences in the volunteer fire department. It talked about some of the characters that are in town and some of the things they did. And the one thing that I found fun is because my dad grew up, his hometown is a pretty small town in Ohio, not this small. And they talked about softball being a big thing. One of the big fundraisers for the fire department was softball. And that was a big thing they had. So that brought back memories for me of going to the softball fields and seeing people play. And it was very interesting because one of the quotations he mentioned is he was recapturing my sense of place one tragedy at a time, because that's what the fire department ended up dealing with. So it's a very interesting book. And if you want to read it, the library does have it in book format, or you can download the ebook or the e-audio book from Hoopla. I mentioned last week that the movie Just Mercy is being streamed for free on some of the different platforms in June. Today I read that Hate You Give, which came out in 2018, is also streaming for free. And it looks like it's streaming on a lot of platforms, but not on Netflix, so I'm not sure why that is. But if you want some books that may help, or some movies that may help explain some of the frustration in different communities of what's going on now, you may want to try Just Mercy and Hate You Give. And that's my thing for today, and I will turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Jackie. This week I was reading some poetry. I'm sure most people here are familiar with Lord Tennyson. In particular, I went back to a poem about Rispa. Rispa was a daughter of Ea, and now I don't know my New Testament as well as I should. But Rispa is a mother whose sons were killed because they angered King David. And it's a very poignant and relevant poem right now, especially if you read stanza 9. It says, "And the jailer forced me away. I had bid him my last goodbye," that's her son. "They had fastened the door of his cell. Oh, mother," I heard him cry. "I couldn't get back, though I tried. He had something further to say. And now I shall never know. The jailer forced me away." So this is about a woman who guarded her children after they were executed. And it's kind of a soothing, interesting poem and very poignant. So I do recommend Tennyson. Now, of course, we have more than Ravinia things in our archives and Ravinia archives. And one of the reasons I'm in the archives today is because I'm helping a researcher work with the materials that are not digitized. And it just so happens that the famous American photographer Edward Weston was born in Highland Park. And since we can't have researchers on site, I was seeing what we had in our collection for this gentleman who's doing a project for the Royal Photography Society. And we have a letter from Weston's father. It's kind of mundane, but in his own way, Weston's father was interesting. He was a doctor, and he worked at a girls' school, or he was leading a girls' school called Highland Hall, which was also a boys' school. Northwestern Military Academy, it burned down. It was on St. John's. But he was president of mental science and the natural sciences at this college. And so having this letter and sharing it helps the researcher know more about Weston, the photographer, knowing about his father. So that's kind of what I'm reading this week and sharing with researchers. So, and now to William, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. This week, I picked up a copy because we're going to be starting doing comic book discussions here at the library very soon. By the time you see this, we'll have had our first one. And in honor of that, I got myself a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15. Now, Amazing Fantasy 15 is interesting for a lot of reasons. It is the first issue called Amazing Fantasy. Up to the first 14 issues have been Amazing Adult Fantasy. But as the editor puts in the letters column of this, they decided to change the name because teens at the time felt that adults were looking at them askew because they saw them reading a book that said Amazing Adult Fantasy. There are a lot of stories in here, so I've got it like pulled up right here. I don't know if you can see it. We've got the Bell Ringer, which is about a guy who lives in an island in a town who always rings the bell. Volcano goes off, he's going to ring that bell. We've got Man in the Mummy Case, which is the story of a criminal who is on the run, who takes a deal from a mummy but does not quite know the cost until it's too late. We have There Are Martians Among Us, which is got kind of sort of an EC Comics vibe of like, oh man, there's this alien ship, we got to find the Martians, but it's too late, they've infiltrated. And they're all really interesting. But I tell you, because I kind of buried the lead, the main reason that I got this was because of the first story in the book, which is the first story featuring Spider-Man. So it's really interesting to go back and read. Like, this story is 11 pages long. It is 11 pages. It very much, like, I understand why it would be popular. Like, it was so good, like so well done, at least by people who wrote it. They thought it was well done, that this is also the last issue of Amazing Fantasy. Like, they tell you at the end of the Spider-Man story that, oh, you can continue to read his adventures here. Well, you can't, because they stopped it. But then they just turned it into Amazing Spider-Man. So that is a testament to how well this was done. And the other thing that gets me is there's things you take for granted. Like the line, the most important line in this entire thing that is associated with this character, as much as the costume, as the webbing, with great power, there must come great responsibility, is not uttered by anyone in this book. It is, in fact, an afterthought in the last panel. As he's walking away after he realizes, oh yeah, I'm going to spoil this a little bit, his uncle dies because he decided not to stop a criminal. Yeah, there's this thing. Not even that his uncle said it, just this concept I should think about. All right, and he walks off into the night. It was really fun times. Like, I went and bought this issue because I wanted to see everything in it. So I've got complete with random ads and whatnot. If you want to just see Amazing Fantasy, which kind of makes more sense, you can go to Hoopla, and we have the Masterpiece, which will give you just the Spider-Man story and the first 10 issues of Amazing Spider-Man. Fun times for all. But that's pretty much what I've been up to, and I'm going to hand it back to Sarah Marie.
That's it for us today, folks. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for any comments, questions, or concerns that you may have. You can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/HPLibrary, through our Twitter, which is @HPLibrary, or via email at hppla@hplibrary.org. You can also find this information through our website, which is hplibrary.org. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, everybody, this is us signing off. Until we see you next, stay safe.